Hey everyone, RogueGold here. Welcome back to the Division 2. Today, I want to dive into the conversation of buffs, rebalances, and reworks. If you did not see, the upcoming Year 8 Season 3 is delivering a huge balance pass to red core gear sets, brand sets. We did a whole video previewing and testing those changes that I'll link down below in case you want to go check it out. And that's awesome, right? It's always good to see more stuff being brought to viability. But the side effect of them doing that, I think, is we've now had a taste of what's possible. Now, we already got confirmation that more of this stuff is on the way in the future, including them focusing on blue and yellow core gear sets, but I personally have set my sights on exotics. I find building around and incorporating exotic talents to be one of the most fun and creative aspects of Division build making. The problem is that so many older exotics have either been power crept or simply never strong or functional enough to make an impact. And so, what I thought might be fun would be to run through a couple of the top exotics that I think need some love, and then by the end of the video, you all can let me know what items would make your list, or if you would prioritize other categories of the loot game or items to be looked at first. But yeah, this should be fun. Let's get straight to it. If you don't want to miss out on my future content for the Division 2, including a look at some crazy new builds once Year 8 Season 3 launches, be sure to subscribe. I have to give a huge shout out and thank you to our channel members as always. This channel and these videos would not exist without your ongoing support, so thank you so much for everything that you do to contribute. But with that down, let's get to it. Alright, so we begin with the Steel and Sons ACR. I'm kidding, I already did a video on this thing, but I did say I would not rest until this got a buff, so please, Massive Bucharest, buff this thing for Season 3, I beg. But our real beginner here is the Sacrum Imperium exotic marksman rifle. I would argue that this is among the worst, if not the worst, exotic in the game. Now, that's not to say that you cannot do anything with this, but between its talent's relatively low power and its very clunky functionality in practice, this weapon just makes for a very unsatisfying experience and a highly underwhelming exotic. So, for context, here is its talent called the Trap, which is also kind of confusingly written. I don't think that helps. It reads, tags enemies when in scope, maximum 10. If agent kills any marked target with a headshot, all other targets will have 50%, 20% PvP, movement speed, and receive burn for 10 seconds. The cooldown is 30 seconds. Killing another enemy with a headshot will shorten the cooldown for 10 seconds. Targets are marked after 1 second in crosshair. So here's the thing, the concept on this is not terrible, right? You're a support DPS role, you lock down enemies and take them out, but in practice it just feels bad. Having to manually look at every enemy you want to mark, the burn is capped in power, it has a long cooldown. So how could we improve this? Here's my idea. Burn and immobilize debuffs rotate every 6 seconds, and as a note, I imagine this being kind of above your shoulder True Patriot style. I'm sure you could come up with more creative names, but Fire and Riot Foam. Eliminating an enemy with a headshot makes your next landed shot apply the active debuff, while applying the alternative debuff to all enemies within 10 meters. Enemies who have both debuffs active at once take an additional 10% amplified damage from all sources. Headshot kills grant you 30% status effects for 15 seconds, can be refreshed. So, a couple of things that I hope this would achieve. For one, it retains the crowd control and damage support role fantasy, albeit with much more usability and power. It also untethers the burden's potency to the talent, so you can now scale that with status effects. That's why I wanted to give it a separate status effect buff on the talent. I also think it would be neat to swap the pretty useless optimal range muzzle mod to an additional like 10% status effects. There are very few exotic mods that offer build-based stats, something like melee damage on the Lady Death. In combination, those things would give the weapon some innate status effects, but also a reason to spec into it more, whether it be via the Habsburg brand or other sources. But furthermore, by giving this thing a dual fire and foam capability, the ability to spread that around without needing to manually tag targets, it should make controlling a room much more feasible. I think the ability to tag one target with both debuffs for a group damage gain adds depth to the talent, it gives mastery for the user to practice, and it just brings greater value to the table in a group setting beyond just some crowd control. So I think changes along those lines would give the Sacrum Imperium some life, some purpose, but let me know your thoughts. Alright, next up, sticking to the theme of fire, we had to bring in the Imperial Dynasty. It had some relevance when it released back with Warlords of New York, but since then it has become pretty much entirely without purpose. Here is the talent Dragon's Glare. It reads, while in combat, applies burn to the closest enemy to you within 20 meters, cooldown 35 seconds. Fairly simple, but ultimately I think that is to its detriment. There's not enough here to warrant using this over another exotic, especially when we have so many more burn sources nowadays than when this released. Think about the Iron Lung, the upcoming Fafnir shotgun, or the Ember Engine gear set. Also, 35 seconds for a cooldown is brutal. Now, back in the day, to my recollection, you could quicken this by stacking skill haste on your build. I believe that was corrected around the time when incoming repair stopped stacking with gear talents in year 2. So ultimately my thought for this is it just needs way more versatility. I think it deserves more power given how far we have power crept in the past 6 years. So my idea is to give this thing some depth and stagger different bonuses depending on how you scale your build. Here's my proposition. If you have between 0 and 2 skill tiers on your build, you gain 10% status effects, and while in combat, applies burn to the closest enemy to you within 10 meters, cooldown 20 seconds. Between skill tiers 3 and 5, you get 20% status effects, while in combat, applies burn to the closest enemy to you within 20 meters, cooldown 15 seconds. And if you are at skill tier 6, you get 30% status, while in combat, applies burn to the closest enemy to you within 25 meters with a cooldown of 12 seconds. But then one extra little bonus, while overcharged, Dragon's Glare applies to the closest and second closest enemy with each application. Inflicted enemies receive Dragon's Mark, which lasts for 15 seconds, amplifying damage taken from all sources by 10%. So my thought process behind this would be to bring back the idea of tuning this item's cooldown and power depending on your build, albeit in a bit more of a controlled way. This at least still gives it a function if you don't want to run a full skill build, but for those who do invest, they get greater payoff. I also liked the idea of giving it its own overcharged function. I wish that were the case for more skill and status based items. Apparently I'm gonna kick with group damage bonuses, but I think introducing something like Dragon's Mark to open up for greater team damage just gives this that much more utility in today's endgame, with content like Escalation being so prevalent. So there you go, a potential way to bring back the Imperial Dynasty. See what I did there? Anyways, let me know what you think. Alright, and then finally, we have the Bloody Knuckles. This one may be the only controversial one, I'm not sure. I think we can all agree that these things are not meta in any way, but I do know that they have some niche use cases, like in the Paradise Lost incursion, at least with some older strats. That's not really my wheelhouse. If you're a Bloody Knuckle lover, I'm sorry for trying to shake things up here. I just don't think these have the relevance they deserve, and I say that not only because they compete in a slot with the Exodus and Overdogs gloves, but they've also got to be one of the coolest looking exotic armor pieces in the game, I think, and it's a shame that they gather so much dust for many people. So currently these offer the over-the-top talent. Damaging an enemy with a grenade or striking an enemy with a melee attack activates Seeing Red. Seeing Red grants plus 25% weapon damage and 100% melee damage. Seeing Red lasts 20 seconds and starts a 60-second cooldown after completion. While in cooldown, damaging an enemy with a melee attack or hitting an enemy with the effect of a grenade will complete the cooldown instantly. So, not terrible, not useless, but I don't think these offer enough in today's endgame to be a competitive option. I think that leaning more into the street brawler fantasy that these are designed around and juicing them up a bit could be quite fun. So, how about hitting an enemy with a melee attack activates Seeing Red. Seeing Red grants 20% movement speed, 20% damage resistance, 40% weapon damage, and 300% melee damage for 20 seconds. The cooldown is 60 seconds, but hitting an enemy with a melee attack while Seeing Red is on cooldown will complete it instantly. So, would that be a bit too strong? You all can let me know. I removed the grenade aspects of this, not only because it didn't really fit the fantasy as well, but also to warrant these stronger buffs I think you should have to get in the enemy's face and strike them, sometimes more than once if you want to reduce your cooldown. I figured that these changes would make this item a lot more flexible and a lot more fun. Run it with Bloodsucker, the Lady Death, to make for a really powerful yet durable berserker, but once again, you all can let me know your take. Alright, well, I could go on all day say. I'll cut myself off there, though. Those are among my top 3 exotics that I would love to see receive some retunings and buffs now that that is something the team is actively pursuing across the game. And don't get me wrong, while I would love to see weapons rebalanced, underused gear talents buffed up, I just think that exotics would provide more satisfaction and fun in the meantime while we wait for such things. But you've heard all of my thoughts. Now I want to hear yours, whether it be your reactions to my proposals for these items, but also on what you think should receive balancing attention next, whether it be exotic or otherwise. And whatever your choice is, pitch me some of your buff ideas. I would love to hear them. That's going to do it for me today, though. I will see you all soon in Year 8 Season 3 for some fun build crafting. But thank you all so much for coming by and watching, and until I see you next, RogueGold. Ow. Oh! We just got a Ravenous! I might not be friendly. Let's go.
Coming to the Division 2.
Let's go!
And